Student-centered isn't necessarily building relationships differently. That stays the same. I think what's different is we believe and trust in our students to the point where no matter what their barriers are, we're going to put the power of learning in their hands. And they get some agency in what that looks like. And that is super critical.
This is the Engaging Leadership Show where we uncover the stories and strategies behind successful educational leadership. In today's episode, we're going to talk about how to create learning experiences in a school that literally has students from K all the way through to 12 in one building. Particularly interesting is some of the innovation that the superintendent has driven around the instructional models that they're doing and how that has dramatically impacted the kids even just within a year. Stay tuned for more on the Engaging Leadership Show. For the last 9 years, our guest today has worked in administration, serving 4 years as a K-8 principal, and she is now a superintendent. She's an expert on self-efficacy and whole child development and has been an innovator in instructional models, one of which is pretty groundbreaking in my opinion, and we're going to be covering that in detail today. So I'm really psyched to have in our studios today Dr. Becky Hutchinson. She's the superintendent of Concord Community Schools in Michigan. Becky, welcome to the show.
Yeah, it's so wonderful to be here.
Tell us a little bit more about Concord and the community that you serve at the district.
Concord Community Schools is a small rural school. We serve 625 kids right now, K-12. We have in-house preschool between both our preschool program and all the way through high school. We have approximately 42 certified staff members, along with 3 other instructional administrators besides myself. So we're a pretty small rural district in the south central part of Michigan.
Very nice. And you have K all the way through 12 within that district, is that correct?
We do, and we're all one campus. So when you go to the lower elementary school, you're going to see preschool classrooms, kindergarten, first, second, and third grade classrooms. And as you walk through the elementary school, you get to head towards the middle school, and it is actually in a connected building. They share a gym, office, cafeteria, and a media center. And then just a quick short walk, like half a block, you can be into the back entrance of our high school, which serves our 912 students. It's really one of the things that draws me to the district because it is truly representative of a small community. And I just love it. It has such good energy and such good connection embedded within a block of the community that we serve. It's definitely a unique experience.
It must be so great that siblings, they can come to school together regardless of which grade they're in. I'm just imagining it now. It has a really tight-knit feel to it. It must do, right?
Yes, it really does. When I was a teacher in the middle school prior to becoming an administrator, I would get to see students walk their younger siblings to class and vice versa. So it is truly joyful to know my own children are in the school system. And with only 40 to 60 kids in a grade level, your teachers really get to know the students, and it becomes really a family atmosphere. And we have about 50 to 60% of our staff that are what I would call veteran staff. They're close to retirement in the next 3 to 5 years. And so they are now teaching students that are the children and grandchildren of their former students. So it really is a blessing to work in such an environment.
Yeah, that is indeed very cool. It's almost like the whole community is one big family. And one of the things that we were talking about before was this idea of the learning experience for students and being able to very deliberately and intentionally craft them such that these experiences are student-centered and they're impactful to their learning. Tell me a little bit about your philosophies and your approach to all of that.
So mission and vision that was developed with the community many, many years ago, actually, is to create safe learning environments for our students so that they can have the skills and achievement to reach their own personal vision. And the first part of that is having the skills and the support structures to identify what that personal vision is. And that's very different than just picking up a math textbook and going page by page. Really, for a student to be able to identify what their personal vision is for their life, they've got to have some unique learning experiences. And so it has to be student-centered. We really have to create learning environments in which our kids are at the center of what we do. We have wonderful experiences all over the country where educators are wonderful and terrific educators who care about their kids. So student-centered isn't necessarily building relationships differently. That stays the same. I think what's different is that we believe and trust in our students to the point where no matter what their barriers are, we're going to put the power of learning in their hands. And they get some agency in what that looks like. And that is super, super critical.
As you think about this, is there an age in which you feel students should have more of this agency? And maybe in the K through 3, the adults maybe are a little bit more prescriptive about what the kids are learning. And then slowly as they get further into middle school and high school, they then are given a little bit more choice and agency in what they're learning and in the kind of experiences that they receive.
I think that sometimes that is a misconception to an extent. Like, you're not going to have a kindergartner that walks through the door that says, I want to learn about hydroponics. And so thus we craft a learning experience for them like that. There is limits to what they can and cannot do. But on the flip side of that, there are very much things in their learning experience that they can own. If you think about play and free choice and building social skills in that way, that's a critical part of a preschool, kindergarten, first graders learning experience. And so you have to give them those opportunities. You have to use your resources to value that time. And then you have to teach into that. It means in kindergarten, you should have several opportunities for students to have free choice where they are in control of their learning. And then when they go out to recess, like students should have 2 different recess opportunities every day because that's where some of those very critical skills are developed.
It's really incredible that even at the kindergarten level, kids are given some free choice in how they choose and opt for learning. Does this create additional demands on teaching and the flexibility of instruction that each of your teaching staff would need to have to cater to such a diverse need from your student base?
Yeah, I think it does. You have to think about your teachers similarly to thinking about how you would value your students in that choice and decision-making process. I think they have to mirror each other. So if you're saying students need the opportunity to have agency in making choice in developing skills in free choice or recess period in those younger grades, then your staff also has to have the same type of autonomy and agency in order to design instructional plans and learning experiences for students that develop those skills. And truly, they are the experts in that area. And so we, as administrators, have to trust that knowledge. And then as we work with them and we do instructional walks and we notice that there may be areas where they could use additional support, then we get them that support and training and allow them to continue to make those instructional decisions. Because I'd like to brag, I think I have the best teachers in the whole world. They truly are incredible and they do such amazing things. And it would be a disadvantage or a disservice for me to come in and say, this is how you should be teaching them. I have obligation to really take a look and expose them to other instructional practices and coach them into growing their learning in those particular areas so that they continue to make small shifts. Really, we talk about being 1% better. If we're 1% better every single day, then we'll transfer to the learning of the students. And ultimately, that's what we're doing. We're risk taking, we're learning, we're growing, we're trying to be very intentional with our instruction. And thus, that translates to those different learning experiences that we think our students need.
I love that 1% better every day, this whole idea of continuous improvement. You're the expert at self-efficacy, especially when it comes to the teachers, and giving them that level of autonomy. And it sounds modest, like 1% every day, but if you do improve 1% every day, you double how effective you are every 72 days, essentially. And is that the approach that you've studied, thinking about your research work in self-efficacy? Like, how does this connect with your practice as a superintendent, as a leader?
So, in my dissertation, I really took a look at, does blended learning specifically, that instructional strategy, help build self-efficacy at an increased rate in comparison to traditional instruction? And what I found was that research really suggests that instructional practice can increase self-efficacy. And through that, I continued doing some research on my own, independent of the dissertation, to just look at high impact instructional strategies. What makes them high impact? And we don't talk about it in the instructional world. If you are a person who really enjoys instruction, which is unique in leadership, what is it about this that makes it a high impact strategy? In my opinion, it is a high impact strategy more than likely because it provides students with the opportunity to build self-efficacy and intrinsic motivation. And those two things are drivers in them building agency in their learning. And as leaders, if we call that out, then we have our teachers being very intentional about selecting strategies that give students these opportunities. And that then removes the barrier that we sometimes face to high quality learning. Often you'll hear teachers say, my kids, they don't think they can do math, and so they won't even try. If we start using instructional strategies that helps build that efficacy in them, then we remove that barrier because they know that they're in control of taking the actions to meet the learning target. This work of being student-centered really aligns with being intentional with our instructional choices so that we can build efficacy and intrinsic motivation in our students.
It's fascinating that your instructional choices have such a tight relationship with self-efficacy and motivation and ultimately student achievement. And one of the things that we were also discussing was your work in pioneering some new instructional practices that are really quite a departure from what we've known for the past hundreds of years of instruction. And this is something that you've been working on in having teachers come together to teach as teams. Tell me a little bit more about that and how you ended up thinking in this direction in the first place.
We really actually stumbled upon the opportunity that was provided to us by the Michigan Educator Workforce Initiative. They were teaming with Arizona State's Mary Lou Fulton College of the Next Education Workforce Initiative in their work. So we are piloting then their team-based instructional model. And this model, I was so drawn to it. First of all, because the model itself is not cookie cutter. It's not scripted. It gives us choice to design the elements so that we can make it fit our students, similar to the instruction that we've just been talking about. Our teachers need autonomy and agency to determine what this model should look like in the classroom. And this is a huge departure when you have a team of teachers working together to provide instruction for students. It's a huge departure from traditional instruction where it was one teacher, 30 kids, siloed instruction. And the reality of it is really looking at our mission and vision and looking at our data, we were missing the target sorely. We were far off base and getting what we wanted for our students because we were asking our teachers to do so many things that it is almost impossible. So when you allow them to work in teams, then now they can share those responsibilities and they can move forward assigning and breaking down different tasks based on their own strengths. If you have a teacher who's really good at data analysis and data gathering, then they can take that on for the team. If you have another teacher who's really strong with communication and relationships with parents, they can be the point person on coordinating some of that. If you have a teacher that's really good at project-based learning, then they can take the pointer lead on that and on. And so what you're doing is creating this distributed leadership inside the classroom, and our teachers are then able to focus more on instruction and leverage their strengths and leverage the adults that they have in their classrooms to really change that learning experience. One of the elements that Arizona State asks us to design is dynamic grouping. Teachers take data and they look at where their students are at and where they want them to be in a certain area, and they group the students to change instruction for them. And then they'll relook at the data and they regroup them. And kids can be grouped and regrouped multiple times throughout the day based on what their needs are. And that's just one of the amazing elements. Some of the other elements is that distributed leadership, where we really are taking a look at distributed expertise and which teacher is tackling which particular response or responsibility. And then across the team, that can change based on where they're at and what they're comfortable doing. In our district, we're really fortunate that everybody saw the value in this. And so we have teams at 2nd and 3rd grade. We have teams at 4th and 5th, 6th and 7th, and then we have an 8th grade team and a 9th grade team. And next year, we're looking to expand that a little bit into some other grade levels. And it has been pretty powerful. Not perfect, of course, bumps in the road as you try and change new things. But some of the really cool things that we've seen come out of it is, number one, I have teachers who meet on a regular basis in each team to talk about students and talk about what's working well and what they want to keep doing and what supports or additional supports a student may need. And thus they are able to innovate inside their team to figure out what the next best steps are. One of the example of this would be on the 8th grade team, which I'm fortunate enough to work in and teach on this year. And so that's been a lot of fun. But one of the things we were taking a look at is we had a good number of our students that were academically successful, but some weren't. And that was a problem of practice we were hoping to solve. Another piece of that was we have students who are academically successful, but we want to continue to grow some of those core competencies that we value, like communication, collaboration, and perseverance, contribution, those types of skills. And we were not finding as many opportunities within traditional content area instruction that we wanted. We set out, how do we create a system where we can do both of those things? And that's where we leverage dynamic grouping, and we broke the kids up into different groups. And those kids that need additional support can go to 1 or 2 different adults throughout the course of the week for this 30-minute period. And then the other students go to another 1 or 2 adults, and they help them. They're actually working on building skills through a variety of board games so that the kids can really learn how to collaborate and communicate. And it's been fun. And what we've seen is that it has a huge impact. We might have had 10 kids that we were worried about academically, and we're really down to 3. And this data has been shown across the teams for the first time in my administration history. Our freshman students that went in typically have multiple kids that fail a subject because that transition is so difficult. And then automatically they're behind. This time we only had 5 failing grades on the freshman team. That's a huge celebration and a huge win. And so we're really seeing that this idea of dynamic grouping and distributed expertise and a dynamic schedule is really having a huge impact on our student outcomes.
That is incredible, and such a testament in a really short period of time. You're already seeing success, and there's so much to unpack from what you've just shared, and I'd love to get into the nitty-gritty into some of this. The first of all, like just dynamic grouping, I can imagine many of our listeners hearing this might be going, you're crazy. It's so hard to come up with a grouping in traditional instruction, and it necessarily therefore becomes rigid. Don't touch those groups. Have those groups out there. Dynamic grouping, it even within this regrouping multiple times in the same day. What are some of the logistics that need to go into that? Like, how do you go about planning that?
First of all, I think you have to have trust inside your team. Your teachers really have to trust each other. And then on top of that, you have to have good data, which sometimes can be a struggle, but you have to have good and accurate data. However, if everybody has a pulse on that and everybody's continually inputting their data and having good conversations around that data, that is a huge piece that helps shift that dynamic grouping. And then if you have good data and you trust each other, then it's pretty simple to say, I've got 5 adults for these 30 minutes. How am I going to break these kids down to ensure that they're going to get what they need within these 30 minutes? And you have to be creative and flexible. Like those 30 minutes were used for something else. But at the core of it, when you put students first and you center them on your instructional decisions, then you realize this is what is best for kids right now. And so you create those systems. And now that we have it, and now that we've seen that it works on this 8th grade team, they do not want to move away from it. We have an opportunity to do a student-led project later in the year, actually after our spring break. And we're super excited about what that will look like because it's cross-curricular and it's going to have a lot of different core competencies embedded into it. But the one thing the teachers are now adamant about is not losing this time where we can intervene and support the students in their academic success through these dynamic groups.
And the other thing that came out from that is you have these dynamic groups cut across grade levels in some cases. Did you find that that was beneficial for the kids, or did you find that it was harder to get those groupings in order?
I think that's one of the key factors. Arizona State's model looks at school or classroom level elements and then school level elements and district level elements. So at the school and district, we have to allocate resources accordingly so that the staff can do these things. And for example, with 2nd and 3rd grade, that's another place where they have the most beautiful dynamic system I think I've ever seen for intervention. I truly applaud their work. But as a district, we had to give them a couple of things. One, we had to give them a common planning time so that they could come together to continually talk about groups. And then when they come to us and ask for additional time, we have to find the way to support them in that. So we had a half day where we got subs and we allowed them to come together as a team. So they got an uninterrupted 4-hour block of time to truly work on those dynamic groups. But their system is incredibly unique because they're at that 2nd and 3rd grade level where they're teaching foundational reading group. And we all know that that's where we've got to have our kids reading well because they start to shift from knowing how to read to reading to learn. So they take a look at their data from a variety of sources and they say, this kid needs this skill. They actually have 5 certified teachers, multiple special education teacher, they have title instructional aides, they have special education aides, and every single adult in that space takes a group and they have a set of skills that they work on with those students for 30 minutes. So now instead of having a group of 25, you now have a group of 8. And inside that 8, in those 30 minutes, they can actually break those kids down further and there's independent practice and then direct group instruction, small group with 4 students, exactly where that kid needs it. And then those kids are shifting. So the 2nd grade teacher who has both my 2nd grade teachers have skills they taught 1st grade. So they have incredible skills in building those foundational readings, skills that students need. So then they have those students that need some of that more foundational work in phonemic awareness and phonics. Whereas one of my 3rd grade teachers, her teaching experience has been in 3rd and 4th grade. So she's going to push kids in a different way with comprehension and inferences and things like that. As a district, we had to give them those resources of time and supporting them when they need things. And then we had to really on that team, they trust each other. To give up your class or part of your class of 25 kids is huge for teachers. And so trust is foundational, and them being able to say, yeah, I know I'm going to have these 8 kids with me, but my other 20 are going to go to another teacher who is better equipped or as equipped as I am to give them these skills in this system. And it has paid phenomenal dividends. They actually were a team that did not want to fully teach. They wanted to go slow. So I said, try intervention. Just try it. You can do it. I know you can. And it has gone so well that they've expanded it to where they even have added another layer of reading support after the first 30 minutes. And the second and third grade teams each team in different ways. They're doing some of this now for math in the second grade. And then third grade, they are grouping and regrouping for math and reading across the grade level. It's pretty incredible, the learning experience those students are having and how vastly different that is from just being in that one teacher, one class model.
That's so incredible. And I'm just thinking through the logistics around master scheduling in a regular school involves serious spreadsheet work. This must be taking it to the next level exponentially. And even from a leadership perspective, I'm going to tease out some leadership lessons from what you've just shared in a bit. But I want to focus just on the team in itself today, because we talked about allocating groups based on strengths of the adults. And I may not be close to this, but I'm imagining that a regular teacher might think, oh, I'm a social studies teacher or I'm a math teacher, so my strength must be in math or must be in social studies. Whereas you're deconstructing those strengths that are not subject related, that go into specific skills that they're going to be imparting to the kids. That must be a huge mindset shift. How did you do that?
I'm not sure we're all the way there with shifting minds around that, but it's baby steps. I really try to look at providing learning opportunities for my teachers differently, at least in comparison to what I experienced as a teacher in the classroom. First of all, I have the most wonderful teachers in the world. But beyond that, I believe that their time and expertise is critical to the success of the district. So if I want them to continue to learn and grow, I have to invest in them. I think our professional learning is incredibly important. I'm constantly trying to take baby steps forward or provide them with small bits of information and beginning to get them to think about things differently. I think a big piece of this is that I have always allowed, and I don't even want to say allowed, we don't do change work in the district without teachers. So if we are developing an instructional framework, or if we are selecting team teaching as an instructional opportunity or a structural strategy that we want to try, I had teachers side by side with me helping to make that decision. And it wasn't a you must all, it was a who wants to. And then we try to do our best to compensate them for their time, because we know this takes a lot of additional work and energy, and learning is hard for adults, for kids, for everybody. We try to acknowledge that and try to support them when they need support or ask for support. So I think there's a lot of pieces to that, and it really starts from just having them walking side by side with them in all the work that we do.
Yeah, that's amazing. And understandably, because this is such a huge departure from traditional instruction, I can imagine this is a multi-year journey that you're on. And the other thing that you mentioned earlier that I want to pull on the thread a little bit is the idea that your teachers are now meeting regularly within each team to talk about the students, what they need, how you can improve their instruction, how you can improve their progress. Would you say that in itself is so powerful? Because how often in regular instruction where we have staff meetings and we can go through the whole staff meeting without actually talking about students, and it just falls off the agenda. And the fact that you have these dedicated meetings to come together and talk about each student, surely that in itself generates returns on efficacy. What's your experience been?
Yes, absolutely. So actually, John Hattie's research tells us that the number one effect size is collective efficacy of your teachers. And actually, I was just talking to a researcher from Arizona State last week, and I told him, I think this is a miss. Like, you guys need to lift this up, this idea of collective efficacy. Because what happens in a one teacher, one classroom model is that you're going to miss some kids. You just know it. Like, how does one teacher meet the needs of all 20 to 30 kids that are in front of them? They are superheroes, but I'm not sure we all have morons. We have to just do the best that we can do. And of course, nobody isn't intentionally left out, but the reality is that's a barrier. In this model, you now have flipped the script. And so by having conversations consistently around this is a student that we need to support, what are our action steps to get this kid to where they need to be? Number one, you're saying, I believe the kid can get there. And that alone is huge. But then to make a plan to get the kid there and continually go back to it and say, did they get there? What do we need to do next? And when you couple that with a strong MTSS system, then, you have high quality tier 1 instruction, you have high quality tier 1 intervention. And then you say, okay, now we need to bring in another team of experts to help us, and you include them in that conversation. Like, collective efficacy, in my opinion, has gone through the roof, because now not only do we have supports for interventions, we have autonomy and agency to look at our kids and say, yeah, I believe I can make an impact. What are we going to do? And then that collective efficacy is, again, like I mentioned, one of John Hattie notes as one of the most powerful practices that teachers can have in terms of impacting student outcomes. And so the conversations alone are unreal, because they really are teachers saying we can meet the students' needs. We just have to find the way. And so that, I think, is where the impact of this model comes from. And as we learn and grow and we get better at it, we get better at, truthfully, the cognitive load that comes with trying something new. We navigate some of that, and some of that second nature, and we fall into, this is just our routine here. Let's push ourselves here. And then that's just going to continue to really grow and push on that envelope of dynamic grouping and cross-curricular instructional practices, personalized learning, deep instruction, in helping kids get to that transfer point where then they are true drivers of their learning.
There's so many light bulbs going off in my head, and I'm just thinking through, this is such an important change in instruction that you're pioneering. And one of the things that I'm immediately going to is, this is so amazing. What makes it hard for other districts to follow suit? In your experience, what has been the biggest challenge in transitioning to a model like this, and how did you overcome it?
I think there are multiple things. First of all, there's trust factor. I think trust is huge. Trust with parents and trust with administrators and trust with teachers. When you have worked 20 years inside a classroom and you know what you do is good, and then all of a sudden you have to walk across the hall and talk with somebody who may or may not share your same strengths or passions, and now you've got to trust that you're going to give them your children, I'd say, and that's huge. So building trust is a piece of it. Being okay with failing. It is so scary, especially when you have mostly veteran teachers. They're incredible. So now I'm saying, okay, we're ready to try this. I don't know what's going to happen. It's okay. Like, it'll be fine. We'll fail together. Nobody wants to go, I'm not good at this. And so there's this risk aversion that we all have as educators, because we want to be perfect for our students and for our parents. And so to try something new, knowing that a part of it is gonna fail, is terrifying. So you have to be okay with the bumps in the road. You have to really know that this is a 3-year journey, at least. Some of it's going to go well and some of it is not. You really have to be attentive to your parents and try to include them in the process. And when things aren't going well, it has to work hard to try to address all of their concerns. And then truthfully, resource management is another huge thing. building a K-12 schedule where you have teachers that are shared K-12 and trying to figure out how to get them common planning time. We were able to make that work for almost every single one of our teams. However, 8th grade team, we just didn't get there. And so they've had a different barrier to overcome, and figuring out how to support them in that barrier has been a challenge all year. But I think truly the biggest thing is traditional instruction feels safe. I feel good and accomplished in that role. And now you want me to try this. And it's scary. And you have to figure out a way to have that trusting relationship, administrator to teacher, to say, yep, it is scary. I'm scared too. So let's take those steps forward and see what we can do. Because I think if we're willing to take those risks for our students, number one, it's going to pay off in dividends, but then they're going to see that same risk taking modeled for them. Real hard learning and deep learning is scary for kids because they want to do well too. They become risk avert if we don't support them in taking those risks to work hard and to really focus on growth. And it becomes a big entangled system where if you aren't able to convince teachers that they're going to be safe if they take that risk, that you're going to provide them with those resources, then it is difficult to make that change.
Love how this whole change that you've been driving at Concord Community Schools is a little lesson in itself for leadership. If I can just summarize all of what you've said so far, there's that trust baseline that you needed to have with your stakeholders, your families, your board, the staff, everyone that's involved in this change. And first and foremost, you need to have built this trust with them, which you did. And then getting over that risk aversion, which everyone has when it comes to change, especially massive change, like this is revolutionary rather than evolutionary change. That trust then has to feed into a sense of psychological safety that it's okay to fail. And it's almost like, I'm paraphrasing, but I'm almost thinking, if we do not take these steps to risk small failures, we're actually failing our kids in a bigger way, that they're not going to be prepared for life and they're going to be always cloistered and wanting not to take any risks. And the third big thing that came out from what you shared to me was this idea of being very strengths-based, almost like being attentive and attuned to the strengths of each member of your team and structuring the workflow that you need to be done around their strengths and allowing them to recognize those strengths. And that's why I spoke about it earlier and asked you about it, because even as adults, I don't think a lot of us are very conscious of the strengths that we have, apart from our profession or the line of work that we've chosen. And being a leader means seeing beyond those artificial lines as to what intrinsically each staff member brings to the table. You've been in administration for 9 years, coming to a decade now. How do you think you've grown or you've managed to get to this point through all of your previous leadership experiences? How have you evolved as a leader?
I like to see myself as the first lead risk taker. I am huge fans of Brene Brown and Simon Sinek and Adam Grant. And so I very much think that everything that I do is really for this long game. I am doing work right now to transform a system for future generations of students. And that's a long process. And so with that, I look at my team and I know that I have strength. My strength is instruction, love instruction. It's a passion and hobby of mine. But I'm honestly introverted and I don't like to always go outside of my bubble to make connections that I need to make in order to provide more opportunities for the team. And so when I built my team, I looked at who I was bringing on and I looked for those skills in them so that we would be a complemented and well-rounded team. I am pretty visionary, but I'm not always great at the details. And so one of my administrators is phenomenal at details. I am really great at thinking about things behind the scenes, but not great at pushing out and making those connections. So another one of my administrators isn't very good at establishing and making those connections. I can be pretty high energy and I can be pretty intense. So my other administrator is very chill. He's very low key and go with the flow kind of guy. And when you put us all together, we really can accomplish incredible things because we balance each other out. And I think that giving the time and space to learn and know those things about each other was huge when we first came together as a team. And as leaders, if you think about playing the long game and you think about transforming a system for your community, then you truly are investing not in an outcome. You're investing in people. We lead people. And so giving the time to them to develop who they are and grow in who they are only benefits them in the moment, in that system, in the classroom or in the administrative role. But they take that home and then they can lead happier, more fulfilling lives because they are recognizing things in themselves that play into those outside relationships. And it's essentially taking, instead of student-centered learning, we really have like adult or staff-centered leadership. You have to put them at the center of everything you do. And there's a huge difference between leadership and management. And sometimes in administration, finding that balance is really quite difficult. But over the course of my time in administration, I learned I didn't know a lot. And I knew that relationships were going to be key. I went from teaching in the district I was in to leading in the district that I was in with my kids and all of my peers. And so making that shift, I knew how incredibly important they were to me. And I needed to leverage that. I needed to keep building that. I needed to be the first person to be vulnerable and say, yeah, I don't know that. When I went down into the kindergarten classroom, the first time I was like, Kate, principal, I was like, wow, this is magic. I don't know what's happening here, but this is pretty cool because I was a middle school teacher. You really have to leverage on those strengths and build that up and know that if you create a system, that system has to be good for everybody inside that system and then when they leave you. And that's really when we talk about building happy, healthy, and whole individuals, that's really what it's about, is creating those learning opportunities for your staff that mirror what you're hoping to create for your students.
That's incredible. Now, one last question for you, Becky. As you reflect on your leadership experiences and imagine you were giving a piece of advice to someone in education just starting out in their leadership journey and thinking about taking that next step, what is one piece of advice that you would give to them in how they should approach this decision?
So I think it's twofold. First of all, you have to have a self-awareness or be willing to develop your self-awareness to know what is your why, what is your vision for what this system can be. And once you know that, once you know your why, then you can take that and you can be that first risk taker for all of the people inside the district. You have to be vulnerable. You have to be good with who you are as a leader so that you can be vulnerable and build those systems that lift up everyone. And as you know that, and you're crystal clear about your vision as a leader for who you want to be, that then translates to your leadership because you're crystal clear about the vision you have for the district. And that is really and truly super important as you move forward, because every action you take that's very visible and not visible at all has to align directly with that vision. But it's really hard to do that if you don't know your own vision and have that level of vulnerability to be able to lead in that type of system.
It's so powerful. So being very self-aware about what your why is, and that gives you almost the freedom to be vulnerable and be that risk taker because you know that every action that you're taking is in service of that why. Very wise words, Becky. Thank you so much for sharing so generously with us today. And thank you all for listening and watching the Engaging Leadership Show. That's all we have for today. This is your host, CT, signing off. And that's all for the Engaging Leadership Show today. If these stories resonated with you at all, head over to engagingleadershipshow.com, all one word, where you can subscribe for free to receive more leadership stories and strategies every week. Also, at that link, you can access the archive of all the featured episodes we published in summary form. It's a veritable treasure trove of educational leadership wisdom distilled for your learning pleasure. Once again, the link is engagingleadershipshow.com. Sign up today to receive the next summary this very week. Until next time, keep leading with purpose and passion, and I'll see you in the next episode.